I want to set the scene for you. It's the 29th of December, it's a Thursday. It's in that peculiar week between Christmas and New Year when nobody really knows what day of the week it is and people are just eating a lot of leftover food, not sure of what to do with themselves, and maybe watching random things that are on television. In amongst those is a TV musical based on the life of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew the Musical. It aired tonight at 9 o'clock on Channel 4, and I think I speak for everyone when I say, what? Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my improvised stagey YouTube channel. If you're meeting me for the first time, my name is Mickey Joe and I'm obsessed with all things theatre. I'm also an independent freelance theatre critic and a content creator based here in the UK. This is not my usual setup. I am not yet back in my flat to make new videos in 2023. I am still in my boyfriend's family home celebrating Christmas. But even though I was having a little break away from making videos, some things are more important than that, like the concept of Prince Andrew the Musical airing on primetime television over the festive period. Like, so much of that is still so confusing to me, and I've just watched the thing. Literally, I have just made sure that I was watching live with the nation at 9 o'clock. I considered it my royal duty to see what this was and form a coherent critical opinion for you all. Basically, I watched the Prince Andrew musical so that you don't have to. Because I had so many questions. Honestly, I had so many questions and have done since this thing was announced, but we will talk about that in a minute. So today, I would like to discuss the Prince Andrew musical. Let's talk about what this is. Let's talk about my initial thoughts on this production when it was announced. I want to talk about what worked, what didn't. I want to talk about whether there could be a future life for this production. And I also want to talk about whether we're comfortable with the concept of this even existing. Is this something morally right to even be conceiving in the first place? Do we as a nation need and even want a Prince Andrew musical? So much to discuss today. Let's get right to it. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure you're subscribed to my stagey YouTube channel. I talk about things like this all the time. Well, not this specifically. That would be incredibly niche content. I talk about musical theatre all the time and plays as well. If you want to see more reviews and reaction videos and analysis of news and drama, make sure you are subscribed. And if you would like to read more of my reviews, then you can click on the link down in the description to go to showscore.com. And if you click on the link that's currently at the top of my description and play Showscore's 2022 Year in Reviews, you can get entered to win a £365 or $1 Today Tix and Showscore theatre token. Now, let's talk about Prince Andrew the Musical. Literally words I never thought I would say. So since this was announced, I have been confused. I immediately had questions and queries and concerns. Questions like, why? What is this? Who is this for? And it's very much something you would expect to see at somewhere like the Edinburgh Fringe, a fun parody musical that pokes fun at the establishment. And if I was seeing it at the Edinburgh Fringe, I would not be at all surprised. However, we're not seeing this at the Edinburgh Fringe. The confusing part of this announcement was that it was going to be on television. Now, we in the UK do not see musicals on television very often. Musicals do not tend to make their way out of the theatre, and there's not a lot of embracing of the art form and the genre on mainstream media. So it's rare to see any musical on television, especially a brand new musical written for television, especially one that's going to poke fun at the monarchy, because even though we're still very divided as a nation as to whether or not we like the monarchy, in the year of the Queen's death, there is probably a lot more pro-monarchy sentiment, maybe not for all of the individuals involved, but just as a concept, a lot of people still would rather not see the monarchy's scandals and potentially legitimate sexual assault allegations brought to light in musical numbers. That being said, we do also have things like Spitting Image and the Windsors that have been doing that for a very long time. So, you know, there is form for something like this, but it's unusual from my perspective that this was programmed in such a high-profile week. I did find that timing really surprising. Now this, I believe, was co-written by Kieran Hodgson, a comedian who also played Prince Andrew in the TV special that I just watched, and Freddie Tapner of the London Musical Theatre Orchestra. So Freddie is the musical genius behind LMTO. I've met him many times, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying so. I ran into him recently at a press night, and we chatted about various things that had happened this year. But I asked him about this because I was deeply curious as to who this was for, and he said that it was probably going to appeal more to the slightly older generation, because those were the people who had lived through a lot of the events that it was talking about, because this is chronicling all of the events of Prince Andrew's life, from serving in the Falklands War, meeting Sarah Ferguson and all of that stuff, up to current Pizza Express Gate and the Jeffrey Epstein stuff and the legal issues, the whole thing. And that made perfect sense to me. Of course, that generation is going to have more of a perspective on this because they lived through more of the things it would be talking about. But that was also not really my question. My question was, is this meant to be for people who like Prince Andrew or people who really, really don't? Because as far as I can tell, it satisfies neither group, because the people who are pro Prince Andrew and pro the monarchy aren't really thrilled to see him getting lightly made fun of, or heavily made fun of, depending on how hard they go. And I think the people who are anti-Prince Andrew maybe see this as making light of a very serious situation. So that is why I'm still asking the question, who was this for? But I have now seen the thing, and I'm ready to tell you what I thought of it. So I was pretty surprised very early on with how they were putting this across, and the fact that almost immediately they used the actual news footage from Prince Andrew's now famous awful car crash of an interview with Emily Maitlis. I was shocked they were using that actual footage and overdubbing it like it was an episode of Mock the Week. But the whole thing does very much have that tone of like a satirical TV comedy show that's going to lightly poke fun at royal scandals. From there, we segue awkwardly into a recreation of the interview done with actors, one of whom is Kieran Hodgson, who is playing Prince Andrew, and we launch into a musical number in which he sings "I Nailed It," celebrating how well that interview just went. Although over the course of this number, doubt creeps in and he begins to realise that he's made a terrible, terrible mistake by confessing some of the strange things that he said on television. Following this, we then flash back to his birth, and the way that the thing is structured, it's about an hour long, but allowing for ad breaks just a little shorter than that. We see various archive news footage of the actual royals and the actual Prince Andrew, interspersed with these little clips of Joe Wilkinson selling newspapers to the British public, who are played by a small ensemble. And then we go between various parody musical numbers. Musical numbers that capitulate on significant moments in Prince Andrew's life, like meeting Sarah Ferguson, like his subsequent divorce with Sarah Ferguson. And these not only parody the actual historical circumstances of his life, but manage to parody the musical theatre genre as well, which is really entertaining. Now, when we have those documentary sections, they are narrated largely by him, by Kieran Hodgson, as Prince Andrew. I'll talk a little bit more about what I think of that as a concept later, but just to give you an overview, that is what the thing was. It ends with him and Charles having this meeting in a church in which Charles is trying to force him to step back from royal life entirely. There's very little mention of the Queen here. They mention consistently that Prince Andrew is Elizabeth's favourite son, and this is a very big factor in the plot, but absent from the discussion is the fact that he is very much kept where he is by Queen Elizabeth II, the late Queen Elizabeth II, fighting his corner and backing him through these legal proceedings, both emotionally and financially. And that's interesting and possibly compromises the political integrity of the dialogue and what they're actually trying to talk about, but it's probably a sensible decision because as much political capital as Andrew or Charles have, it's nowhere near as much as the adoration that people still have for the late Queen Elizabeth II. So I think better not to depict her at all, which they don't. They don't depict Diana. The only characters we actually see are Andrew and Charles, Sarah Ferguson, Emily Maitlis, Tony Blair, and Margaret Thatcher, randomly. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, how hard does it actually go? And like I told you, I was shook at the beginning when they were showing the actual interview footage and he was overdubbing it and clearly making fun of Prince Andrew. The whole thing does go quite hard and doesn't pull its punches. If it were a hard-hitting political drama, then, you know, it'd probably be a lot more impactful and the whole thing is like a parody musical, but it does still get its jabs in. It is still not kind to Prince Andrew, or really to many of the key players involved here. But Andrew definitely comes off the worst. You know, they mentioned the whole now famous Prince Charles tampon line, but the fact that Prince Charles is played in this by Munya Chawawa, who looks nothing like Prince Charles. It's not at all meant to be any kind of a close parody. It's hilarious that he's playing Prince Charles, and he's also just such a hilarious comedian anyway, but that is, again, probably for the best. So that is what Prince Andrew the Musical is. Let me tell you whether or not it worked. So listening to me talk about all of this, you may be thinking, gosh, what a dreadful idea. And let me tell you, it was not actually that bad. There was a lot of this I was able to really enjoy. It was ridiculous. Some of the parody lyrics were actually very, very clever. They were naming different items off of the Pizza Express menu with soliciting a minor, and there was one rhyme that did annoy me because Emily Maitlis tried to rhyme laughter with BAFTA, and like that's such an easy fix because you can just have her deliver it in a slightly mid-Atlantic accent and say BAFTA and laughter, which I know Emily Maitlis wouldn't pronounce it laughter, neither would I, I'm from the south, but it's better than saying BAFTA, come on now. But a lot of legitimately very clever lyrics, which is something I always appreciate and which I think is undervalued in contemporary musical theatre, but also the music. Some of it is composed by Freddie Tapner, some of it is composed by Pippa Cleary, who is the brilliant, hilarious composer behind the upcoming Bake Off musical in the West End, as well as the songs that feature in Rob Madge's beautiful one-person show, My Sons Are Queer, But What Can You Do, as well as the musical The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 and something. I didn't see it, some sort of fraction. But the songs are brilliant and they parody existing musical theatre songs so well. My favourites are two songs involving Sarah Ferguson. So the first one that she sings is this classic musical theatre I Want song, and the orchestration underneath is so familiar of The Wizard and I in Wicked, and other songs that are also similar to that, so Waving Through a Window from Dear Evan Hansen, and You and Me But Mostly Me from Book of Mormon. These are all offshoots of The Wizard and I, but it's very much that contemporary, very pulsing, moving forwards, I Want musical theatre song. And the lyric is so good because they take it from this strange interview clip in which they're talking about their early courtship, and she pronounces profiteroles weirdly, and so we then have this parody scene where Prince Andrew offers her a profiterole and she goes into a dream sequence, and the whole lyric of the song is that my profiterole in this, or what's my profiterole in this? And it ends with her maniacally staring at this profiterole singing, that's my profiterole, like that's genius, come on now. It is legitimately very funny. When you can separate yourself from the Prince Andrew of it all, and how depressing that might be, it is very funny. Equally, the two of them share a romantic divorce number, which is a hilarious concept in and of itself, parodying classic musical theatre love songs. They're outside underneath a trellis. It's very 16 going on 17 in its staging, very West Side Story, one hand, one heart, whatever, as they're slowly walking down an aisle to decide to divorce. But the music underneath all of this is very All I Ask of You from Phantom, possibly the greatest musical theatre love song of all time. Debate in the comments, I don't have time. But that shows a cleverness, and all of the best satire, which is what this is, ought to be very clever. At the same time, I appreciate something that is ridiculously dumb, and I think you can do both of those things simultaneously. You can be clever and dumb, and that is not the shortcoming of this piece. The performances are really good for what it is. The writing is really good for what it is. It has an inherent, massive structural flaw that keeps it from being great, that keeps it from being enjoyable. And it's not its fault, but I'm going to talk about it in the next section. So as much as I did really enjoy the material, and I did, much to my surprise, the issue with this is that it's hard to have a political dialogue taking aim at this character when they are also your protagonist and your narrator. And I know it's not trying to be as serious as all of that, but if we think about something like Evita, you have the character of Shay, who guides us as the people through the story to narrate the ascendancy and downfall of Eva Peron. If she told her own story, it wouldn't allow us to form an opinion about her from a third-person perspective. And when you have Prince Andrew, who is not even meant to be divisive, he's being delivered to us as this controversial figure who is not necessarily redeemable, but is charming in spite of his many blunders, and that's putting it really, really mildly, then he really ought not to be the person narrating his own story. I think that's where it's a little harder to enjoy, because I noticed myself having much more fun once other characters were singing and once we were experiencing it from other perspectives, when Prince Charles got a very small moment in one of Andrew's early songs, singing about how people think he's boring because he only cares about plants and he doesn't know how to make conversation. That was really funny, but it's hard to watch Prince Andrew singing a song about how great he is. And I think inherently that's what kept me from enjoying this as much as I wanted to. And there's lots in it for musical theatre fans. Let me tell you, this has been written by some brilliant musical theatre lovers. At one point, he is singing in front of the letters HRH, all lit up in red light bulbs. It's an obvious gypsy reference. Later in the thing, we close with a tap number, for crying out loud. They're all wearing these yellow jackets and he's dancing with an ensemble and he's tapping in a church while King Prince Charles is trying to convince him to step away from royal life, and he ends up dancing by himself because the ensembles slowly leave one by one and the music slowly fades out. It's very the end of Live, Laugh, Love from Follies, and even, again, a little bit Rose's Turn and some other musical theatre moments as well. Like, there is lots of musical theatre Easter eggs. There are some great musical theatre performers in the ensemble. Philippa Stefani, I saw you, love her. And probably more that I wasn't able to spot because I spent most of the time either with my jaw on the floor or nursing a very necessary gin. But it's hard for me to have fun in all of that when it feels like I'm laughing with someone who was accused of significant sexual assault and associated with a known and convicted sex offender and paedophile. Like, there are issues here bigger than the scope of a fun parody musical. That's the problem I have with the concept of a Prince Andrew musical. So, more to the point, I want to talk about whether a Prince Andrew musical can ever be a good idea, and whether we will see a further life for this production for that reason. So I'm really interested to hear what other people think about this, but I do struggle to get on board with the concept of a Prince Andrew musical. You know, I'm glad they didn't pull their punches, and it wasn't the BBC, so I wasn't expecting it to be a love letter. This was Channel 4. And it's probably no worse than things like Spitting Image and things like The Windsors, and if you like either of those, you are probably likely to enjoy Prince Andrew the musical as well. You know, it's a really capable satire, but the themes involved and the nature of the allegations make it fodder for such a bigger drama. If we're going to see this explored in art, we really need for it to be something like The Crown, that is going to be hard-hitting and investigative and really consider the implications of the fact that Prince Andrew is still the Duke of York and is still operating in certain capacities. They have this very dramatic title card that came up at the end with an announcement after the final, like, jazz handsy final song being like, he's done this, but he still has all of these titles. And that's so not the tone of what we've just spent an hour watching that in and of itself is very jarring. It just doesn't feel like this is the medium for us to be telling this story yet. And it's an uncomfortable time to be telling this story because all of this only very recently unfolded. And yet, such is the way of things in the UK that people would probably rather we just didn't talk about this at all and didn't explore it at all and just left the royal family to deal with their own business. But I think it's important that this does get talked about and that this does get explored, so I would rather this than nothing. I don't want for there to be silence about this. I think this will have gotten a lot of the right people a little bit frustrated watching at home, and I think the fact that it's being swept under the royal rug, if you like, is so incredulous that a part of me is really glad that this is being shown on primetime television. I guess I'm just astounded that this managed to make it to the 29th of December, 9 p.m. on Channel 4. It's still wild to me that this was even happening. Now, do I think this has any kind of a future theatrical life? Well, the material is actually really great. I think I enjoyed it more than the stage version of the Windsors that I saw as we were coming out of lockdown at the Prince of Wales Theatre. I could easily see this going somewhere like the Edinburgh Fringe. A lot of the performers who were attached to the TV version were really, really talented. I loved Emily Bede in particular, who was playing Sarah Ferguson. She had a great voice, she was really funny. But I do think that it would do really well there, or even somewhere in London, a little off-West End venue where it can be satirical and incorporate new adapting things happening in the political landscape. But more so than anything else, I think that this writing team could take aim at a lot of other political plot points. You know, there is more than enough fodder for that here in the UK. We have bizarre politics happening all of the time. I mean, the whole chain of the last however many prime ministers is all a ridiculous farce already, so it could be very quickly turned into a parody musical. And where you have something where the themes aren't quite as intense and there may not be such tangible victims still watching this on TV, that is probably more appropriate fodder for musical parody and satire. But again, I am curious as to what other people think about this. So let me know in the comments section. Did you watch Prince Andrew the musical at home? What did you think? Do you think this is a good idea? Is this something that we should be doing? Is this something you would like to see on a stage somewhere? Where could you see it happening? Who do you think should be Prince Andrew on stage? God, this is a weird discussion, isn't it? Let me know all of your thoughts and let's process this one together. I think we need the support. Thank you so much for watching today's slightly unexpected video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my Stagey YouTube channel for plenty more videos, including lots more reviews coming in the new year. I have so many exciting plans, you're not even ready. Also, if you would like to support me as a Stagey content creator, you can use the super thanks button down below this video to give me a little Stagey tip. Very much helps me to keep making videos like the one that you just watched for free. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!